Hey there. This is part of our series, Free Your Mind. And today we're going to talk about the prison of small dwellings. So when we think of small dwellings, we immediately think of a very small, tiny house. And I think a lot of times we box our mind, our thoughts in very tiny houses. And that is a form of imprisonment. And when I mean small, I mean it not in the physical sense, but in the psychological sense. Something that is small is trivial and petty. And these are very easy and subtle traps to fall into. After all, if we knew beforehand that which we're focusing on is totally petty and trivial, we probably wouldn't do it. But when we focus on the specks in other people's eyes, all of the things that they're not doing, and I'll talk about a little bit of how we create that trap. We're not looking at the depths of our own sins, we are focusing on the petty. When we focus on the slights and offenses of other people's, especially based on expectations we place silently on their heads, we're also being petty. There are things that are offensive by people. They can be offensive, and there's probably the right place to right-size that. But one of those differences is we put an expectation that they don't know of, and they fall from it, and then we let that bother us. That's a small dwelling. When we are consumed with desires, competitiveness, jealousies, for very temporal symbols, meaning we know they're temporary, and their primary purpose is feeding that pride of life, we're putting ourselves in a small dwelling. So perhaps you relate. When I let someone's offensive comment or disrespectful behavior govern my thoughts over and over, I replay it over and over, I am imprisoning my mind. That replay of what happened, what was said, what I want to tell that person, my thoughts around why that person is so horrible, I am imprisoning my mind. And I may be right. I actually could be very likely right about those reasons, but I've imprisoned myself within those thoughts. Boy, that person's a sociopath and can't do their job well, and they're complaining about me as opposed to working on their own thing. Why can't he just do what he needs to do? Why can't he have an adult conversation? There's some truth in that, but the question that I think we want to try to address is, well, am I imprisoning myself? When my wife gets upset and emotional over details that bother her more than me, perhaps we haven't had a discussion on it, like what time should the dishwasher turn on? Whether an item was thrown away should have been recycled. When a child's homework assignment that I'm reviewing, I didn't mark as incorrect. There's a narrative that builds up over and over, and that's a captive, petty one. You don't care. You're incompetent. You can't see what you do, but you have to focus at what that is. So, for example, there's 30 questions. One was not done, and my thinking might be, for example, I'm not here to point out what they're doing wrong. I want them to encourage learning. So one could say, well, that's not as important. And obviously, what one thinks is important, unfortunately, is a personal choice. But that personal choice can be, I want to dwell in a small dwelling, or I want to expand it. It's long-term and bigger. So we can both have that. And when you have this smallness that invites smallness, you can have this web. Now, what I'm not saying is that we just let all heck turn loose. Paying the bills on time is not petty. It may be onerous, it may be difficult, but it requires attention. It's not petty. Reviewing the fine print of a contract before signing, listening to a doctor's recommendation, evaluating finances, those deserve responsible behavior. They're not petty and trivial. So it's not really so much us to judge other people's, it's to really ask the things you're getting bent out of your axle that you're focusing on day in and prioritizing, making a priority. Is it in the end petty and trivial? Remember, petty and trivial is a comparative term. The question is, what are we comparing it against and how do we spend it? right? Things that don't matter, we compare it against something, right? It's a comparative thing. There are certain ways we can do that dimensions. So, for example, the degree to which something is perishable. Something which is perishable, moths can eat it, thieves can steal it. It's something that can just be taken away as at will. That might be something that is considered petty, right? In the right context. Something that gives less life versus gives more life, that is also a way to determine, is something petty or not? So being able to have that right assessment is really a large part of evaluating whether you're going to put yourself into a prison. One way to work out of that is to find the antidote to imprisonment. And we think total freedom is the freedom from imprisonment. But I say your mind is free when it is a slave of Christ. And being a slave of Christ is not about conforming yourself to particular behaviors. It's not conforming yourself. What it is doing is it's saying, I am taking the values and shaping it based on that. I am shaping it to what is important to Christ. That is a form of freedom. So the artifact that comes from that is a personal mission. And while it's personal, there are some things that we'd want to consider. So, for example, remembering to love evil people who slap your face and steal your clothes. That might be something that we all need to share, and that is a way to free ourselves from things that might make it small or petty. Rejecting the traps of the law and self-righteousness. We often find ourselves in self-righteousness, and then we become petty and small dwelling. We can make ourselves smaller when we choose to only parrot back very simplified and incorrect versions of our religion and scripture. It's watered down. That shrinks it. The true truth is what sets you free. It is not your truth that you create. It's not getting it from the majority opinion of the world. It's not hearing what a newscaster says. It's not a platitude you've heard over and over from church. The truth is from God in His Word and Spirit. And that is how you free yourself from small dwellings. So hopefully you've listened to this, you read the condensed version, go through the scriptures that I reference, and then ask yourself right now, do you find yourself in the traps of the trivial? And then share with others in the portal that I've shared with you, because I want to hear, and you'll be able to connect and hear more about how you escape from those. All right. Thanks for listening. See you in the next one.